Hello, I'm Matt Guichard, and this is No Holds Barred. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into the area of immigration law. We're pleased to have Erika Portillo here of the law firm Guichard, Tang, Portillo, and Garrett. Erika is a specialist in the area of immigration law, and we're pleased to have her. We're going to jump right into it, and I'm going to start asking some questions immediately of Erika. I want to get into an issue. You use the term "we" a lot, and I like that because I know you're talking about the immigration bar. Is there an organization that you belong to that kind of advocates for this and lobbies for this, and perhaps meets with various members of Congress to advocate for these DACA people or various other people?
Yes, we have the Association for Immigration Lawyers. It's national. It's called AILA, and we are advocating all the time and also overseeing what's going on with the government and agencies. So whenever we see something that is unusual, we approach it to the authorities, and we do it because there are some people that they don't have an attorney to help them. So at least when we have our clients and we face an issue, we want that to be resolved. So for a person who doesn't have a lawyer and doesn't have the resources, can at least get don't have that, they won't have that problem. So we also, the organization or the members who are all immigration lawyers, they go to Congress, to the White House to talk about immigration reform. So it's a very good organization because we do it not because somebody is paying us to do it. It's because we see our clients, we see what they go through and what they have been going through, and we want to also benefit society. So we know that them getting the status would only benefit them, but it will benefit society as a whole because they will become more productive and they will be able to succeed even more.
Another interesting point that you make is that kind of the issue of people being represented. So many undocumented people are not represented, but kind of a sensitive issue, I want to say, here in Contra Costa County and some other counties is there was a time when the sheriff of Contra Costa County allowed ICE to house people in the jail in North Richmond. But for political reasons, he was forced to give up that contract. And how has that impacted your practice when you don't have the ability to just go over to Richmond and meet with clients who've, let's say, been detained by ICE for some reason?
Yeah, at the beginning, we were I guess the principle was positive, that they were saying, why are you giving these contracts to ICE? We are against ICE, and why are you helping them as a county? But in reality, what we saw later is that by doing that and canceling the contracts, the clients were transferred to a farther location that it was very hard to talk to them, to communicate with them. And not have they couldn't have the right representation. Also, many attorneys would say, no, I won't represent them because I won't be able to see them. I won't be able to talk to them and properly represent them. So that was something that, in my opinion, impacted our clients negatively. But I know that they were doing it, or the people that they were trying to change that or saying that that was bad, the reasoning behind is because all the ICE situation of the people being placed in removal proceedings. And I think that they have that resentment coming from Obama, the Obama administration. But yeah, that was something that happened, and we're still having that problem that they are far away. Their relatives cannot visit them. But one thing to say is that from 2020, they have not been arrested or not many arrests people. And so there are not many people in proceedings around in the Bay Area, I would say, because of 2020. They don't want to house them and put them in danger of the virus. But now they're probably going to start again. But I think the number of people that we saw, that there were a lot of people in remote proceedings, was during the Obama administration.
So that kind of the politics have changed and all that, but kind of the unintended consequences of people saying, I don't like ICE, actually hurt undocumented people.
Yes, because the relatives, it was very hard for them to see them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the idea of when somebody comes to you, what are the costs of as a lawyer, say, representing somebody? If somebody comes to you and said, let's say on a family-based, kind of the example you gave, one of your cases, somebody's married, they're here, it's a family-based case. What are costs?
Usually it's between $7,000. If somebody's married, came with a visa, $7,000. Some cases when they don't have a visa, they didn't come with a visa, they can be $11,000 in attorney's fees.
And that's not just your fee. That's kind of in that practice of the group of lawyers who practice immigration. Those fees are generally in that ballpark. Is that correct?
Yes, and some may charge more. I would say some may charge more than say that they would charge less. I would say that it would be more probably in some instances. That some attorneys would charge more.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not inexpensive. So somebody not only to be here, so people who really are drawn to the United States and want to come here, and whether it's cancellation of removal or any of the others, humanitarian reasons, it can be costly.
Yes, it can be costly. And we were talking about the detainees and detention facilities. I just want to go back to that because I felt that we are not talking about the people that they were coming through the border and they were placed in cages. So that's a different issue. We're talking about people that were here in the United States and they're arrested because a crime, and then they're placed in remote proceedings, because that was a different issue. People coming at the border, trying to come to the U.S., and they were being arrested and placed. And as you know, there was a big issue that the children were separated from their parents. So that was something that happened during the Trump administration. And to this date, these children has not been, so a lot of children have not been able to reunite with their parents because they don't know where they are. So that was a very sad and disappointed situation that happened during the time.
Yeah. Well, talking about that right now, we know that various political reasons in Central America, Mexico and all that, every time we change an administration or something happens, it seems to attract people to our southern border, thinking that, well, things are going to change. I'm going to benefit from it, and it appears that that's what's happening right now. We have an awful lot of people at our southern border that are kind of anxious to get in, and people are deciding that if they just step across the border with their whole family, that will benefit them. They'll be allowed to stay in the country and then go through some kind of proceeding. How does that actually work in reality?
Yes, so they are allowed to stay in the country, but now while their case is being heard, so that means that they're going to be sent to a hearing. They're going to see a judge. They're going to have to present their case. If they have merits, then they will be able to stay. But a lot of cases don't, because asylum law, or the laws related to asylum, do not protect just random violence. Like if you're saying, well, my country is very violent, that's why I came, I'm afraid, they will not qualify to stay, because they have to be in a group that the U.S. will protect that group, and they will be able to stay. So many people will come in, and they will be directed to go to a hearing. Some don't go to the hearings at all, and some do. And in the end, it's very likely that their case will be denied if their case doesn't have merit. But the problem that sometimes they face is they don't have representation also. So many people probably don't know that the U.S. doesn't pay for attorneys to represent undocumented people. People have to pay for their own attorney. And so many people that come through the border obviously don't have any money, or sometimes they don't have relatives here. They are not allowed, they cannot pay an attorney. And unfortunately, their cases are denied even if they had a reasonable fee and they prove their case. They could prove their case with an attorney, but without an attorney, sometimes they cannot, because they don't know how to express themselves. They don't have the tools to provide the evidence. So that's also very sad, because people can be sent back to their country and they can get killed because they did have a cause to come to the U.S. But also there are many people that they just come in because they heard that something is going to change, and so it's a variety of people that come to the border, but they don't get the status immediately. They do have to go to hearings and they have to prove their case.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that some don't show up at their hearings, so fair to say that some people come into the country, they post bond, perhaps, and then a hearing is set, and they don't go to the hearing. So they just meld into the country, and they're just one more undocumented person in our country. And if they don't do something like break the law, then they're on nobody's radar screen. Is that fair? In other words, the government is not out saying, oh, you didn't show up for your hearing, and so we're sending out immigration or ICE agents to find you.
In some instances, they are. So during the Trump administration, people, when a person doesn't go to their hearings, so the judge issues an in absentia order. So during the Trump administration, they made a point of going and look for them, for those people that never went to their hearing.
Who is the they? I'm going to interrupt you. Who is the they that went and looked for them?
ICE.
I see.
ICE went to look for people that didn't attend their hearing. So right now, I don't see that happening. But yes, if somebody doesn't go to the hearing, they get an in absentia order, and that means that it's like a removal order. And if they never get arrested and they just continue living here and nobody ever noticed them, then they will continue here.
I know sometimes people have referred someone to you, and you've mentioned, I've heard it before, that they don't have any relief. What does that mean? So somebody is here, they come to you and say, I'd like to stay, here's what my issue is, and you look at something and say they don't have any relief. What does that mean?
That means that they can apply to get a work permit, they cannot get residence, and they cannot get citizenship, so they cannot get anything. Because they don't have a qualifying relative, for instance, if they need a waiver, so that the forgiveness, to ask for forgiveness, or they have the permanent bar, or they have never been victims of crimes. So there is nothing under the law that they can apply and get something. So that's why it's not relief.
But the good news is that there are lots of things that if you found, there are lots of reasons why people who are undocumented can get relief if represented by a lawyer who knows all the different factors.
Yes,
correct?
yes. So it's always good to go and find out, but do I qualify for something? There are some people that never have come to a lawyer because also they're afraid that the lawyer is going to be somehow related to immigration, or they're going to give up their information. But no, it's everything confidential. When you go to a lawyer, it's everything confidential. We have an ethic that we cannot disclose any information discussed during the consultation. So yes, it's always important to approach a lawyer and ask about the status and see how they can fix it. And if they cannot fix it, at least they will know what to do.
That always brings to mind, though, the issue of people, well, particularly Mexico. As you're a former prosecutor. You were a government lawyer in Mexico. Interesting. We don't have time today to talk about all of her background, but it would be fun at some point to have you back just to talk about the things that you did while you were a lawyer in Mexico. But the point is that many people do not trust the authorities, the police in Mexico. They come across, they're undocumented, and they have that same kind of cultural, I'll call it bias, against the authorities here in the United States. So they wouldn't come to a lawyer perhaps, or they wouldn't, they just keep a low profile and hope that nobody ever catches them.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And also there is another thing that a lot of people also they hear that a person was doing preparing documents and they never sent anything, so they paid the money to this person and never got anything done. And usually it's when they go to a notario, because Mexicans, for instance, they believe that the notarios are lawyers. Mm-hmm. And they trust this person who says it's a notario. And in the US, you know that a notario just take a few classes and then you are certified to be a notario.
So we call it a notary, so notario in Espanol.
Yes, exactly, the notary. So we call it notario in Spanish. And in Mexico, notaries are lawyers who are given this power by the government to sign legal documents. But in the US, they don't have that training. So a lot of people are defrauded because they go to a notario, they pay all this money, and they don't get anything. Mm-hmm. So that's something to also think whenever they're going to go to see somebody. Is that person a real lawyer in the U.S.?
Mm-hmm. We're getting kind of close to the end of our interview here. There are so many things I'd like to ask you. And I'd first of all ask you if you'd like to come back at some point, because I think we could spend another half hour talking about this very interesting topic of immigration. But before we go, I do want to talk about asylum. We hear about that all the time. And I know you've had experience with representing people in asylum cases. What is asylum? And just give us an example of a case that you've handled where somebody has successfully gotten asylum.
So asylum is a benefit that was created by the U.S. to protect people, refugees, people that are struggling in their country, and that the country is not going to be able to protect them. The one instance is a person who suffered domestic violence in their country. For instance, a person in Mexico was abused by the husband. It's actually one of my clients. He was abused by the husband for many years. She filed for divorce. He threatened her that if she did so, that he was going to do something to her, to even kill her. So she had to come to the U.S. fleeing, and we applied for asylum so she can get that benefit. So she falls within that criteria that the laws protect her. And the reason is that Mexico is still very a macho society, and victims of domestic violence are not treated as they should be, or they don't give them the seriousness of the situation. And the police, usually when they call and they saw a woman saying that the man has been hitting them, then they don't take that seriously. And that's why this case is in the U.S. We're going to be able to get that approved because it meets the criteria. Mm-hmm. But many situations don't. In asylum, somebody who's living in a very violent place, and they come because they said, I was afraid of going out all the time. So then they're not going to qualify unless they fall within a criteria. Another instances when a person is gay, for instance, in El Salvador. Also, El Salvador, the society is very macho, and they are persecuted actively. So that's another person another client that I had that was gay, was persecuted, was raped, and was able to get a status in the U.S. and asylum. So they give them asylum that's the benefit. But after a year, they can apply for permanent residence, and then residency, and then after that, they can apply for citizenship. So they get a permanent stay.
So good stories then. Good stories. If you, Erika Portillo, had a magic wand, just tell us a couple of things that you would like to see immediately done with our immigration laws. Just
the permanent bar. The permanent bar and the waivers when they ask for qualifying relative to allow children to be able to be a qualifying relative instead of only parents or spouses. So permanent bar and the waiver, a qualifying relative.
Okay. And with the permanent bar, I know we had talked about it. How exactly would that work with your magic wand?
So the permanent bar, if it's taken away, that would mean that a person will be able to get a status to be a permanent resident because it would qualify if the person came to the U.S., left because it was an emergency, and then came back illegally. That would not matter, and they will be able to be residents and eventually become U.S. citizens. And it's benefit a U.S. citizen because usually it's a permanent resident or a U.S. citizen who is the spouse that is trying to help the undocumented spouse. So that would be, a lot of people would benefit from that. And the other one is the waiver. So a waiver is needed when a person comes to the U.S. illegally and stays, never leaves. That person qualifies for a waiver, but I mean, can get status, but they need a qualifying relative to get a waiver. So they need a spouse, resident, or U.S. citizen, or parents, resident or U.S. citizen. So sometimes I have couples. So the two of them, the wife and the husband, are undocumented. They have a U.S. citizen, adult child, 21 years old. The child can petition the parents, but the parents will never be able to get permanent. They are not going to be able to be permanent residents because they will never qualify for a waiver because they are both undocumented. So that means that they don't have a spouse, citizen, or permanent resident, and they don't have parents who are permanent resident or U.S. citizens. The parents are in Mexico, for instance. So the only person that they have are their children. They have this child that is going to be able to petition, but they have other children, but they don't have any other person to help them. Even they could have siblings, but not the siblings can help them with a waiver. And the waiver is essentially asking for forgiveness. They're saying the government, I'm sorry I came illegally. I'm a person of good moral character. I have been working so hard, and my relative is going to suffer hardship if I leave, extreme hardship if I'm removed. So there are many people that have U.S. citizen children, but they cannot get status because they don't have a qualifying relative. So those two things, if they are changed, we will get a lot of people status and be able to stay, and also the society will improve. Our society, they're not going to be in the shadows, and they're going to be able to buy houses, get involved in the society. Get
car insurance, get licenses, and be legal out on the streets.
Yes. That would benefit everybody, not only them, not only their household.
I agree. Well, I want to thank you very much for appearing here today. Again, promise to come back and we'll chat about some more of this incredibly interesting issue of immigration law. Stay tuned for the next episode of No Holds Barred.